we're going to get started. We have at least two more members that are going to be arriving late. Charlie Harbeck is on his way, and then Pat Allen is going to be here. He's got a meeting in Portland, so he should be here. And then Bob Silverforb is out of town tonight. So this is the first meeting. Welcome to Charter Review Committee. Thank you for everyone volunteering your time to be part of this, on top of your normal duties on your various boards and commissions. This should be a pretty intensive process, actually, over the next 2 to 3 months. We'll talk about schedule and things like that. So tonight is mostly an organizational meeting to get started, selecting a chair, going over the agenda, going over the background materials that we prepared for you, answering questions that you might have about the process. And we should be here no later than 8:30 is what we planned for tonight. So just a reminder, we are videotaping these to show on public access and on our website. I think ultimately the work that you do that comes out of this will end up in front of the City Council, and some of those proposed measures may end up on the ballot. So I think when you're talking about the charter, which is, we like to say, the equivalent of the Constitution at the local level, and the only ones that can change the charter are citizens, that there is a lot of citizen interest in what's going to be discussed over the next few months. So before we dive in, I think we know everybody, but just for the benefit of everybody, if we can do quick introductions, maybe if you are a member of a certain board, what board, and maybe how long you've served, and anything else you want to share for the folks here and then the folks that may be watching. So why don't I start with our Council President Henderson.
So again, I've done my introduction, but I'm Linda Henderson. I'm the Sherwood City Council President, and this is my third term on the council. Thanks.
And I failed to introduce myself. I'm Joe Gall. I'm the city manager here. I'll be your primary staff person to support you along with the city recorder. There may be a need for the city attorney at some point, but that will be on a as-needed basis, only if necessary, if the committee wants questions answered from the city attorney's standpoint. I did this myself as a citizen in Multnomah County back in 2009. So I was sitting where you were as a citizen, and it was a very interesting process, and things ended up on the ballot and were voted on. So I think this is part of the local government process that I really love, because the charter is so important to what we do here on a day-to-day basis. So I'm excited and looking forward to it. So Sylvia?
And I'm recorder. I think most of you know me. Recently supporting the special committee that was formed, and for 7 years I've supported the council in this position and been here at the city for about 13.
I'm Beth Cook, and I've been on Planning Commission since this summer, and I've lived in Sherwood for 2.5 years. And I worked for the city of Portland years ago during the time that they were reviewing their charter. Didn't work on it directly, but had to provide input as staff for the agency I worked with.
Okay, I'm Jennifer Kuiper, and I'm a citizen at large on the committee, and I've been a citizen of Sherwood for about 18 years, and formerly I was on the Parks and Recreation Board for about 8 years, and on the YMCA Board for about 6.
I'm Neil Shannon, and on the Budget Committee. I've been on the Budget Committee for a couple of years. Originally got involved because I wanted to see what the Planning Commission was up to, and just been kind of a thorn in the City Council side every once in a while. So,
I wouldn't say thorn.
Good evening. I'm Jack Hofber. I represent the Library Advisory Board. I was appointed to that board earlier this year. Been a resident of Sherwood for a couple years.
My name's Elise Fordermark, and I'm the chair of the Cultural Arts Commission. I've been on the commission for, I think, maybe about 4 years, and I've lived here in Sherwood for about 6 years.
Brian Stetcher. I'm from the Parks Board. I've been on that board for about 4 years and lived in Sherwood for about
6 years.
I always do these backwards. Okay. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time going over what's in your packet and talking briefly about how we got here, because I think it's important for everyone to know how and why we are doing a charter review committee. So if you open up your packet to the charter revision history, in that section, you'll see Resolution 21355, which was the resolution that created this committee. But I think it's important to note that this idea to create a charter review committee actually came out of the City Council retreat earlier this calendar year. The council had identified the need for kind of a comprehensive review of the charter and to form a charter review committee, which I think this is the first time in many years that this process has taken place this way. It's a fairly normal process in most jurisdictions on a somewhat routine basis to have a citizen committee like you delve into the details of the charter and make recommendations to the elected body. So that's where this comes from. This is a council directive from earlier this year. I think with some of the things that went on over the spring and summer with Walmart and some other things, that's one of the reasons it didn't start till now, because the special committee was up and running during the summer, and there was a lot of work that was going on. If you wanted to know why the delay from springtime. I think the council took a unique approach. There's no one way of putting together a charter review committee. I think it's unique that they said we have folks that are involved already and have experience on our various boards and commissions, and decided that would be one rep from each committee who's already involved and kind of knows public meeting laws and knows the city, rather than coming in totally with nothing in terms of experience. That's a unique way of doing it. We'll see at the end how that plays out. It's also important, the council felt, to get citizens at large that weren't necessarily on any boards and commissions, and that's why the 3 citizens were added. You will decide as a committee how you operate over the next few months. You'll notice on your agenda tonight that there is no public comment, but I'm assuming that you will probably want to add that to your agenda or consider adding that. Folks are going to want to comment on some of the ideas that you'll discuss, and they may have some ideas they want you to consider looking at that you haven't thought of. So that's to be decided by you as a committee once you're elected chair and move forward later this evening. We also, as you know, on a board and commission, always have a liaison from the council. So Council President Henderson will be the primary liaison from the council's perspective. She will be keeping the council apprised of your activities throughout the process, and is also very interested in the charter and the importance of the charter. So I think you're going to have a very active, hopefully supportive from Linda and myself and Sylvia in terms of helping you do your job. Are there any questions that you might have on the resolution itself? I think you've seen this maybe in the past. There is an expectations document in Exhibit A. Welcome, Charlie. Sorry for the problem with the email. I apologize. So why don't we did quick introductions just in terms of who everyone is, which board and commission they serve on, and anything else you want to share with the committee.
Okay. Charlie Harvick, I'm the chair of SERPAC committee, which I've been on the committee since its inception in 2001. And I'm a local resident and business owner, Railroad Street Antique Mall.
Which just reopened, correct?
Yeah. Open on the 29th.
Awesome. Any questions on the resolution that council passed to create the committee or on the expectations document? Okay, the next item on our agenda is just to kind of go through what you're receiving tonight in terms of the packet. So I'm going to go quickly through order. The first tab is actually the existing city charter. So if you've not had the opportunity before tonight. Certainly before your next meeting, this is what you're working with. This is the existing city charter. It's commonly referred to as the 2005 charter. That's when it was adopted, or most of it was adopted in 2005. So we will be going through that, and you'll be making recommendations and discussing changes to that document. The next section of the folder is a little bit on public records and meetings law. Sylvia is going to go over that briefly with you tonight. Most of you are familiar with that because you serve on boards and commissions. Even though this is a special committee that is temporary and short-term in nature, you are subject to the public meetings and records law. So you will operate just like your different boards and commissions operate. And we'll go over that this evening as well. Sylvia will also go over briefly the election calendar. You may have seen in some of the original legislation, the direction from council is that they would like to see any proposed measures, charter amendments on the May ballot. May 2014 is when they created the committee. So we have given you, and we'll go through the specifics, there's 4 options in 2014 for election. And in terms of your work, if we're going to hit that May election, your work's going to have to be done pretty quickly. So we can talk about that later tonight. So that's why that election calendar is in there. I already talked about the history. And then the back piece is a sample of, I think there's 5 different jurisdictions, all Oregon cities, all similar in size to Sherwood and their charters. Folks like myself who look at charters quite often, everyone is slightly different, but there's a lot of language that is consistent jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So this is just a sampling of similar sized cities that you can look at as you're going through your work over the coming months. We have others that we can get to you if you so desire, but we didn't want to overwhelm you with information. So we tried to choose jurisdictions that were similar to Sherwood in terms of size and character. So this is your binder, at least to your starting binder for this evening. You're going to be getting materials throughout the process that you can put into this binder, and hopefully it'll be thick enough and not necessitate a need for another binder. So, any questions on the agenda materials or the packet materials?
Joe, I think it's in here, but could you just maybe summarize any previous attempts at changing the charter?
Well, as you know, I've only been here a little over a year, so I know, and Councilor Henderson and maybe Mayor Middleton can chime in here, or Sylvia. There was charter amendments 2 years ago?
2 years.
2009?
No,
2011?
2011,
Yes.
spring. Yeah, it was.
And that was the most recent. I think there was a number of changes. It was all lumped together. It failed. I know one of the things that was on that ballot was a change in the term of the mayor from 2 years to 4 years. I think there were some other things. And we're actually working, Sylvia and I, on compiling a history, looking back at all those changes, because I think that history is very important for you. And we were just not ready to provide that this evening. Anything prior?
Well, the current charter that you have, it says Exhibit A in the charter that's in the packet, and that's because for some reason we didn't adopt a new charter back in 2005. There were 2 charter well, there was a charter change in May of 2005 to go to what's called a home rule charter, which is basically a model charter that the League of Oregon Cities recommended, and a lot of municipalities went to them because it was just simpler, more uniform, and easier to understand. And then in November of 2005, we also voted to the citizens voted to allow Willamette River water as a possible drinking source. And of course, the council moved forward with that project. So this has been in effect since 2005. There was an attempt in spring of 2011 to make some amendments to the charter, but that failed. And I think, as Joe mentioned, there's a number of different ways you can go about forming a charter review committee. You can just solicit anybody from the community. You can utilize boards and commissions. And the last time that a charter review went through, we didn't do either of those things. And so when Mayor Middleton and I were talking about the charter, we were really adamant about, having it be a public process, open to the public, inviting people into the community who already have an interest in the community, and then, of course, 3 members at large, because we wanted an opportunity for anybody, to come in and participate. But for all intents and purposes, with the exception on the very last page of the charter, the charter you see before you was all passed in May of 2005. So, and one of the things I liked, if you look at the sample charters, like for example, the first one is Tualatin. One thing that I appreciate is that after every subject is the legislation that enacted either the amendment or the inception of that. And I think that's really helpful. You have no idea. Like, I've had a number of people ask me over the last month or so, what's with the solid waste incinerator provision? And I'm like, that was in 1990. I didn't live here. We moved here in 97. So I don't really know. I'm sure there was a concern. But so when I was looking through, we've been looking at these sample charters for a while now. That's something that, I'd like to have the committee consider, which is if we make amendments to change how the charter reads so that you can see under each section when it was enacted or repealed or amended. So, but does that answer your question, Jack?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And as we develop that history, we'll share that with the committee as we work backwards. So I did want to mention you do have one alternate citizen at large, Renee Browse, who is with the YMCA, is in the audience. She is an alternate. We anticipate this to take at least a couple months, if not longer. There may be a situation where one of the 3 citizen at large members can't serve any longer, and we wanted to identify an alternate up front. So she'll be here as much as possible, listening in and ready to step up if necessary. So, okay, with that, I think Sylvia has a couple items to go over, the meeting calendar and the referral process and timelines.
So briefly in your packets, you have a tab, a public meeting law. So I'm not going to go over that in any great detail. I think most of you on boards and commissions kind of are familiar with that public meeting law. But this is just a good reference that that we received from our city attorney when the city worked with the special committee. So this is a pretty recent statutes of process and procedures for our meetings here. The other portion is on the election calendar. What I'm going to hopefully bring for you at the next meeting is a tighter timeline to follow this election calendar. So, for example, based on the dates that this committee decides to meet, if you guys meet, once a month, twice a month, that's one portion that this committee will discuss is your own meeting calendar. I'll bring, upon determining those dates, the calendar for this community room so we can make sure that we're not bumping another event that's scheduled in this room. I'm also going to bring a more detailed election calendar showing the dates that the council will meet. Upon this committee determining amendments to the charter, those amendments eventually, when this committee brings them to the city council will have to schedule them on their agenda to discuss those items. If there is an adoption of those recommendations, staff has to draft that legislation. We have to adopt it. There is a public notice process that has to occur. Upon that public notice process, then the election process kicks in. So generally, the timeline that you're looking for when you look at these election ballot dates of March, May, September, and November, the council has probably an 8-week period prior to any of these election dates that the election process is occurring, from noticing to adopting to creating that ballot title to creating the explanatory statement. So just kind of keep that in mind, and that's the detail that I'm going to bring back to you at your next meeting, so that you have again a better idea of the timeline that you're under.
Didn't you say that they had targeted May 20th? So
Again, that is, I think the target date is pretty much up to this committee. It's a date that some of the council members have voiced, looking at, for example, the November election. With the November election, if this committee chooses to change the mayor's term from a 2-year to a 4-year, are you going to make that change and have that those candidates who are filing for that mayor's position in that November election? That timeline is a very tight timeline. So looking at those proposed dates of an earlier election, that's in consideration of the fact that this coming November 14th, we do have, I believe, 3 elected council members and the mayor's term on that ballot. So that was kind of the reasoning for that. Again, the timeline is up to this committee.
Any other questions related to the calendar at this point?
So basically, that would mean March 20th or thereabouts, if we were going to hit the May 20th ballot, would be a March 20th.
Well, we'd have to have, you'd have to have
That
all
would
of
be
your
a
work done, make a recommendation, then we'd have to
council
draft a
decision.
ballot title. Yeah, refer it up to council, then we would have to draft a ballot title and explanatory statement, and then we'd have to have enough time for an appeal period before we take it to Washington County and ask them to put it on the ballot.
and that would all have to be done by March 20th.
Well,
Or is
if
that-
I was
is
just
that a
looking at the
date?
calendar,
Is March 20th? I mean, that's the date. When is that? Is that the date that we need to have materials to the county, or is that the
Yes.
material?
That at this point, that calendar of timeline, I will bring that back to you. I don't want to misquote any dates at this time. So just know that you're looking at about an 8-week period of work that needs to be done from the time that this committee concludes their recommendation to the council. Upon that council adopting your recommendation, we have about 8 weeks to meet certain timelines. So that's that detail I'll bring to you.
Ideally by January 20th-ish, or
January, the end of January, mid-February.
Okay.
So again, you're looking at, if you're going to meet twice a month, are you going to meet 4 times a month? Do you plan on meeting 6 times a month? You know, how soon can you get this work done? And again, that schedule is up to you.
That target was discussed at the resolution when the committee was created, because we are facing an election. So that's why when I say it's a target, that's certainly what the council suggested. We're giving you the 4 dates so you know what the 4 options are in terms of what's available in 2014. I think the fact is they'd like to see any proposed amendments on the 2014 ballot. So really depends on how quickly you work through what you're going to work through. Okay, I think the next item, Councilor Henderson, I know you can explain what you did with each of the councilors. Sure. And pass that document out.
so what I've just handed out is basically a summary of concerns and or items in the charter that council members that I either met with or solicited feedback from would like this committee to consider. And it doesn't mean necessarily that a counselor is advocating for or against something. These are issues within the charter that they feel need to be looked at, updated, removed, determined whether or not they're practical or even useful. For example, under item 2, section 28, we have a provision in our charter that talks about nominations, and we've never used that section of the charter. And it deals with nominations of individuals who may want to run for council or mayor. And depending upon how you read that, that could be an analogy I used was if you want to go to the Air Force Academy, you have to get a letter of recommendation from one of your members of your congressional delegation. No letter, no admittance. And I don't think that's what the intent of it, but I don't really know why it's in there or how it's ever been used. Obviously, if we need to fill a council seat because, for example, when Councilor Clark passed or somebody moves out of state, a member of council can make a recommendation or a nomination, but it's not under that section. So I put that on there because I don't really know what it's for or what it's trying to address. Same with item number 4, merit systems. It says that the council will review the hiring and firing and promotion policies of the city. Well, we've never done that. And this is my 9th year. So I'm not really sure what the original intent was, but these are just items by section or by chapter, by section that members of the council asked me to convey to you, if you would please consider them. Pros, cons, amendments, modifications, whatever you think is most useful, looking forward to how we really want the charter to be a tool. So, any questions about any of those or anything I can clarify? Okay.
The public will have this entire packet posted on the website within a day or two. This is the meeting record. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did learn some through the special committee experience in terms of, trying to get the information out to citizens and using our website and getting information, including the videotape and things like that. So we're going to hopefully do a better job than what you saw at the special committee, whether you thought that was good or not. But I think, with the interest in this, and ultimately it's going to be on the ballot, getting that information so people know what you are discussing and the results of this process. So we're going to try to do a good job with that. So I think the next item is, before we switch over to you folks, is you get to select a chair. And Sylvia, I think you've always helped committees do this. Usually it's just you take nominations, and then depending on the number of nominations, you will take a vote to select a chair amongst yourselves, and then we'll hand the meeting over to that individual for the rest of the evening and the rest of the process. Am I missing something, or is that basically okay? So I will ask if there's any nominations from Charter Review members to take on the chair position.
I would like to nominate Patrick Allen. I know he's not here yet, but I think he'd do an outstandingly good job of facilitating the group.
I don't know if you need a second for that, but I would certainly second that. But I would also like to nominate Brian if he's willing to accept to be considered.
I would just as soon not be considered.
Okay.
So that's no.
Yes, it is a no.
Any other nominations?
I did chat with him, and he is willing to serve.
I was just going to say, he's not here, but he'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, is that one of
You
those?
almost became chair. No.
He'll be here momentarily, but I did check with him, and he will be. And I've worked.
Yes, he's coming.
He's on his way, and I've seen him work in Salem. I mean, he's very effective leadership. I've witnessed him at the Department of Consumer Business Services, in addition to attending planning commission meetings and school board meetings. And he's a very good facilitator. I think that bringing together so many different people from different corners of the city and the activities that we have. He's familiar with many of them. I just think he'd be a really outstanding chair.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Patrick is chair, but he's not here.
If he is willing to accept.
So he can't be vice chair, so I guess we can talk about selecting a vice chair, and whoever's selected among you can continue the meeting. Any nominations for a vice chair?
Are you interested?
Actually, would like to nominate Neil Shannon.
I'll give it a try if you'd like.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Vice Chair Shannon, you get to take over the meeting until Chair Allen gets here.
Well, I guess the first thing on the agenda, of course, is a call to order. So, call to order indeed. And then there was a request for a roll call. I guess, Sylvia, is that something you do?
So at this point, Chair Allen is currently absent, due here shortly. Vice Chair Neil Shannon is here.
Yes. Oh,
Yes,
here.
thank
Sorry.
you. Beth Cook,
Here.
Charlie Harbig,
Here.
Jennifer Kuiper,
Here.
Jack Hoffer,
Here.
Elise Vordermark, Brian Stetcher.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the next thing on the agenda would be to ratify the nominations of chair and vice chair. I would like to call for a vote of ratification of Pat Allen for chair and Neil Shannon as vice chair. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We've already gone through the selection of the vice chair. So I guess the discussion of the process that the committee would like to consider utilizing in reviewing the charter. We would normally defer to Pat, but Pat's not here. I would like to actually be interested in kind of doing a little round robin, and maybe Brian, starting with you, to see if you've got any comments of how you'd like to see the meeting proceed, whether or not you see requirements for weekly meetings, bi-monthly meetings. I know that we're still looking at the calendar, so we don't have a real answer for that. But and I guess I'd like to see what some of your goals are.
Yeah, right now I'm not real clear on what the product is, what you're expecting from us. Are you expecting a number of amendments that we're going to put before the citizens, or a single amendment that we're going to put before the citizens in the election? And that would change my approach to how I would recommend we do this. I remember the last time it was the charter amendment was put to a vote. I personally voted against it because it came out of the blue. So I think this is a good step involving the public, along with the board and commission members and the members at large. So it's at least a few citizens will have some exposure to what we're up to. But I think I need to really understand, before I could go into detail about how we're going to structure this meeting, what the heck the project is. So
I'm going to let you start, Council President Henderson.
So, again, I don't speak on behalf of, I don't know what it is about this mic. I don't speak on the behalf of council. I'm only speaking for myself. But I think from the experience we had with the last charter and previous charters and other charter review committees or charter amendments in other municipalities, my wish or desire would be, if you want to make a change, like going back to council positions at large, that you not lump all the amendments into one paragraph, because I think that's very difficult for the public and for a voter to, try to decipher what exactly all those amendments mean. So my recommendation, whether it's just a cleanup, like taking Willamette River water off of the amendment, off of the charter, is that you list each amendment separately. So we would, which is more work, but I think it's better for the public when they go to vote, they can choose yes or no on certain amendments instead of lumping the, saying, we're going to have term limits, we're going to have a mayor for 4 years, we're going to go back to at large, we're going to require the city manager to live here or not to live here, and lumping that all into one group. And so it's only a yes or no to the entire group. And so my preferred, method would be to literally list each amendment that you want to make or change you want to make to the charter as its own separate ballot title with its own separate explanatory statement. And that way people have the opportunity to separate out the issues instead of lumping them into one, one ballot title and one explanatory statement. So I don't know if that helps you.
And just to piggyback on that's the more common approach. West Lynn just went through, I think they had 4 separate amendments back in September that their citizens voted on. I've mentioned the Multnomah County Charter Review Committee I served on, and we came out with 6 different amendments that ended up on the ballot. So people, they may like the idea of term limits. I'm going to vote yes on this, but I think the mayor should stay 2 years, so I'm going to vote no. So I think our recommendation is to, as you go through this process, do something along those lines. Because I think when you lump everything together, people have strong feelings on certain things, like term limits. And they may like 90% of the proposed changes if they're lumped together, but I don't like term limits, so I'm going to vote no. So I think it is more work, but by separating them, you're helping voters decide what they like and don't like. So.
Great. If that makes sense for the rest of us, as far as the way we want to attack this, I think it's a good way to do it. I think we can pretty much step through the charter section by section, and probably at the next meeting we ought to bring all our recommended changes in, and then just start discussing them in order of the sections that appear in here, and see how the chips fall as we go through that, and see, which ones have momentum behind them and we think ought to be put on the ballot, and those that we don't think have enough momentum amongst our committee and amongst the public probably aren't worth putting on the ballot in that case. So that would be my way to attack it.
Okay. Sounds good. Elise?
My only addition to that would be perhaps during the meetings, we say on the first meeting, try to attack chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 or something like that, break it down so that we know exactly what our goal is for each particular meeting. If there's a particular chapter, let's say the term limits or the at-large, which might have more discussion, that we have a larger chunk of time dedicated for those sections, as opposed to, the part where we're taking out the water, verbiage and that sort of thing. So that way it'll kind of keep us going, and we'll have our homework, for each meeting to.
Right. And we can
forward.
identify that as part of the agendas and
Exactly.
take a look at
Exactly.
it. Again, put that together as part of the timeline.
Right, and then if there's citizens who feel strongly about particular things, they won't have to come to every meeting. They'll know, what we'll be doing each time.
Jack?
Well, I agree with the 2 previous speakers, and I guess just a couple other points. I think the election date is going to be critical as to how many times we meet, obviously, because if we choose that May 20th date, that means, sounds like to me, weekly meetings as opposed to anything else. But so that's going to be very important for us to think about which one of those we think we want to try and hit. And then secondly, I guess there are some things that I just call cleanup, like the Willamette River and perhaps the incinerator. And I don't know that even has to go to a vote because, the Willamette River, you're not going to overturn that since the plant's built, the pipeline's in. and I don't know about the incinerator issue, but I don't want to lump everything into, or I don't want an amendment specifically for cleanup, I guess, unless we have to do it that way.
That's a question actually we were talking about today, and I think the more conservative approach, and I'm not an attorney, but that the charter to me, in everything I've learned in my 20 plus years in local government, is that the only ones that can change a charter are the voters. It's the equivalent of things that are in the Oregon Constitution that maybe legislators want to change, but they're stuck, and it has to be on the ballot. So that to me has always been my understanding, but I'm not an attorney, so we probably have to look into that. But we were debating that today about specifically that Willamette River one because of the vote that happened that really, isn't effective at this point because the voters voted to go to the Willamette. And it's still in the charter. So it's kind of a cleanup item. And how do you remove something like that? So that's a question that's left unanswered. So.
Well, thank you, Jack. In my own particular case, I was in opposition of the charter change 2 years ago. And primarily my issues at the time were how the charter amendment was proposed, and I had some issues with the term of mayor were the two that were primary key to me, and they allowed me to choose the rest of them to go down too. So I kind of agree with you that this idea of breaking the amendments into pieces to allow the voters would be more efficient in the long run. One thing I do also think, and of course we'll check with the chair and the rest of the committee, is that we do need to get public input. And I would suggest that, part of the question is whether or not do we get public input at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting. Personally, I think it's a little bit more effective at the beginning of the meeting, which would allow people to present their ideas before we sitting down and discussing the objectives, rather than making decisions and then having people say, well, you made the wrong decision. So one question I had for you, Sylvia, is, and I know this is sometimes a question, is can you limit the amount of time that public comment is involved? And not just the fact that whether it's 3 minutes for an individual, but I would hate to have 30 individuals come in all wanting to have their 3 minutes, and therefore we wouldn't end up with a meeting at the end of the night. So
You can limit the time as a committee. So basically that's the committee's choice. You can accept it. You don't have to accept it at all. The process that I would recommend that you follow is the current process that's used with the council and the other boards and commissions. The form that we have, the sign-in form, indicates it's a 4-minute limit. That the language on that form was adopted by legislation. A lot of people don't know that, but a lot of the language on there was adopted by legislation indicating a time limit. So again, that's up to you as a council or as a board if you want to use 4-minute, 3-minute. If you have a large audience, if you want to limit it to 2 minutes so that you can capture more people, that's completely up to you.
okay, and I'll let that kind of decision wait for Chair Allen to get involved. So, and I'm sure he'll review the meeting minutes. So, Jennifer.
Just another thought on that, if you don't mind. One thing we could do is we could ask the public to submit those in writing, and that way it wouldn't take time away from the meeting. We could still allow verbal public comment, but since we're going section by section and asking for changes, maybe that might be a way to approach it and save ourselves some
Can we change the time
time.
limit, though? Can we change the time limit per meeting, or does it have to be set 2 minutes for every meeting, or
No.
can it change depending on how many comments we have?
Absolutely. You can change it to whatever you want. And I think it's a very good idea to receive the written comment as well,
Yeah.
because it allows those comments to go into the record. It allows you to review them and go back to them, and allows the community to see them as well. One thing that we're creating right now is on the website. This committee will have a page on the website. Once that page is created, you're going to have your agenda packet. You're going to have your all your meeting materials. It usually takes 1 or 2 days after a meeting occurs to get the video up. It usually takes a few days to catalog, like, for example, the item that Councilor Henderson passed out. that needs to be cataloged into the record. So anything that's distributed will have to be cataloged. An email will be set up for this committee. So the public can be emailing the committee. And the committee, for example, would be, charter committee at sherwoodoregon.gov, for example. So that way, those come to the city will keep the record of those. For every meeting that occurs, I can, if you want, print those out, print them, bring them to you, and you can have them the night of, and also forward them to you as they're received, so you're not getting a pile of emails, the night of the meeting. Okay.
Again, I don't know how much public participation there'll be throughout the process. One of the things we did in Multnomah County is we had the same discussion on our first night, and they would take public comment for a limited time before they got to their business, do their business, and then always before wrapping up the meeting have another short opportunity for public comment for the folks that were there. So kind of have bookends, and that worked pretty well. That's just another option to consider. Again, we don't know how much public interest and how much public comment there's going to be in this process because it's new territory for us.
Anything else, Jennifer?
No, I mean, what Brian and Elise mentioned is exactly what I was thinking as well. It'd be really nice to have, before each meeting, identification of what we're going to be talking about so that we can prepare. And then it's a little bit tangential, but I'd like to have a copy of the League of Oregon Cities standard charter, just so we can compare, to get some context as to what the rest of these charters look like with what the League of Oregon Cities prepared. Can we do that?
It sounds like you want a copy of the model charter that the league puts out.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
We can get you that. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay, right.
Charlie?
Yes. I have a couple questions about, I guess, a little bit of history. On the last charter review that was turned down by the citizens, what were the main, it was all lumped together rather than broken out, is that right?
Correct.
And what were the issues that were on that? I know it was the mayor's term, but what else?
I believe, I don't have it memorized, but probably because I voted nay. It was changing the mayoral term to be from 2 years to 4 years, and going back to citizen to vote at large as opposed to by position. But it was, like you said, Charlie, all lumped together.
So it was really just the two issues.
There was some Scrivener cleanup stuff,
Something, for instance,
just like Jack mentioned, that were, just
kind of like the water plant.
right, exactly.
If it helps you at all, I actually do have a copy of it, but it was Resolution 2011-063, adopted July 19th, 2011. So if you go back to the minutes of July 19th, 2011, you should be able to find it there.
2011-063, Neil?
Yes.
Okay.
And what we can do is provide that to you. I think
Part of the history?
as part of the history. I think it's important as you figure out whatever you're going to suggest that you look at what maybe didn't work in the recent past especially. Because that's what I've heard in the short time I've been here, people saying there were certain things that I liked in that, but I really didn't like this, so I voted against it.
I think what I recollect the most was that people didn't like the process more than maybe what was on the ballot.
That may be true as well.
They want to extend the 4-year term limit for mayor. That was the issue.
So
Anything else, Charlie?
Just that, as far as the timeline goes, we need to decide kind of what we're shooting for. That'll kind of have a bearing on how often we're going to meet.
Well, my concern is that if we start looking at these individual amendments, it may take a little bit longer. I don't know, but it's just something to consider in stepping up the number of times that we meet. It may be that as we start getting into this, if we're coming up with, an amendment to do housekeeping issues and then amendments to do 5 or 6 different things, that's a total of 7 amendments, and how long will that take? So I don't know that we could set now. Maybe we need to start getting into it to determine how many times we're going to be meeting.
We'll take a look at that a little bit further. Well, let's get Beth her comments.
Well, I agree with Brian and Elisa's comment regarding the agenda for each meeting. I think it is important in order to get good public input, to have a list of what sections we're going to review at each meeting. And I'd also like to suggest during the town center, we actually had a public input process that I thought was fairly successful. We had pretty good turnout as well, and had received a lot of really good questions regarding the process. Where it's kind of like you had multiple tables, and again, it was kind of broken out by section of what we were considering, and I thought it went over really, really well. I'd like to suggest that we do it if we have time to do one of those types of sessions with the public and invite them, so that it's more than just public comment to us, but it's actually discussion format.
A round robin.
Well, it was. If any of you attended, it was. We had multiple tables, and again, it was by section, and you had different times to go to each table. But it really did help, I think, get some good, valuable input into the process. So I think people.
Beth, I've heard lots of good comments from folks about that process. I'm just curious because I wasn't there, and you may not know. Did Planning Commission members staff?
We staffed each table.
So you'd go to talk to this table,
Right.
and there'd be planning commissioners there
So-
and staff that could answer
So
specific.
we might have two of us at each table. So we might take, we're gonna, two of us will focus on this section, two of us will focus on this section, and so forth. And so that was how we staffed it.
Okay.
And then there was city staff there as well.
Sure.
To answer any other, and basically to serve as a resource to us as we were answering questions.
Okay, great.
Linda, did you have any other comments you wanted to add?
Actually, the mayor. Sorry. The mayor had what I think is, and I had considered this too. I just didn't know if we wanted to take this route. But there are certain issues because we have a pending election in November of 2014. There are some issues regarding the charter that are time sensitive, right? Some of them are not time sensitive, and you may want to spend more time considering them, taking public input. But as the mayor suggested, we could literally split out the charter votes and do a couple of amendments in May and maybe another amendment in September or November. So if you had 8 things you wanted to amend or change or include or remove, you could look at what is time sensitive, put those issues on the May ballot because they affect the November election. For example, if we don't get it done in May and we wanted to go back to election at large, Sylvia's deadline and Washington County's deadline is like September 5th. Well, that's before the September election. So that would be one avenue or one strategy, so that you don't feel like you have to do the entire charter review in a short period of time. You could just take those issues that are unique to the November election, put them on the ballot in May, and continue working on other aspects of the charter that you think are, need more time or need more research, or you guys just need a longer period of time to review and to consider.
I
So.
think that's a really good perspective. And
Excellent
we could
point.
brand it as, a long-term, 1-year charter review process, 9-month charter review
Right.
process, and so that we communicate to the public ahead of time that this is how long it's going to take, and you're going to see some of the work here, and you're going to continue to have the ability to give input. So,
Right,
might
and that
work
way
better
you
for our
could
schedules.
you could literally look at the charter and see what's time sensitive and address those issues first, if they don't affect other issues of the charter, and sort of prioritize the things that you need to take care of that are time sensitive. And then as Elise said, some issues are more important to others. You're going to need more time. You might need a whole meeting to talk about term limits. And term limits could affect, obviously, the next November election. But certainly a great suggestion, Mayor. So, but that means that you have to, work a longer period of time. So,
Would you allow a brief comment from the public at this stage?
It's up to Chair.
I have no objections. Please do.
The proper term.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Kurt Christensen. The proper term for what you're doing is revising the Constitution of the City of Sherwood. And I
think that's a serious matter. And I think, with all due respect to all of you, that as much deliberation and caution as you can find time in your personal lives to dedicate to this would sit better with me personally. I think that Mayor Middleton's suggestion of splitting off things and time-sensitive things may have some merit, but in general, I wouldn't be afraid of erring on the side of taking a lot of time to reflect. This kind of information, these kind of changes, people need time to digest it. When you go to the voters the next time with a charter recommendation, you want to be sure that you've got a bullseye. You don't want to be putting out stuff that isn't going to be passing. You already have a history that voters are very leery of what's being put out. So I would trust you and suggest to you to take all the time you need. Use your conscience, use your ethics, and just say no if it's too much of a hurry. Don't let politics or other things dictate the speed of this process. But be a deliberative body. Take the time to listen, and then move to the ballot.
I certainly do second that and agree that, and I hope that we all are as deliberative as we need to be. Thank you. Next on the agenda would be needs from the committee to staff. I think we've outlined about 3 items so far: calendar, model charter, and history. Thank you. Is there anything else that any of the committee is thinking of? Okay. And then we do need to think about upcoming schedule. I'm looking at the calendar right now, and again, I would love to have Pat here for it, but Pat's not here. I'm thinking in 2 weeks, at least to get the process started. That would put us on the 19th of December. At that point, we can take a look at whether or not we want to go another 2 weeks after that, which would take us to the 2nd of January. But I think for the next meeting, I'm proposing that we consider it in 2 weeks. I'd rather make sure that we're starting quickly rather than delaying and then rushing towards the end. But any other comments from the committee?
Go ahead.
Come on, Ryan.
What should we bring in 2 weeks? Do we want to try and bring proposed amendments before the committee in 2 weeks?
How long do you feel that you're going to be able to deliver? I think the 2 things that we need to see fairly quickly would be the history and the calendar. Do you know when those would be available, Sylvia?
Monday?
Okay, well, and so I would suggest that those get emailed out. I like the idea of taking the charter in segments, so I might suggest that if you've got some ideas, kind of go through the charter yourself and say these are some natural breaks. We can discuss what those breaks are at that time. And if you've got some ideas for specific items that we can kind of put together on a timeline, then I think we can kind of put the timeline together in 2 weeks from now. We'll have the calendar. Bring your own suggestions if you've got some suggestions, and we'll kind of put that together as a spreadsheet, so to speak, and maybe we can put a schedule together for meetings after that.
Okay. I would like to actually have a little bit of time to digest all this information and make sure that I understand the detail of this charter first, and I really would like us all to make sure that we understand that we're all on the same page. So that if there's a verbiage in the charter, it might mean one thing to Charlie, it might mean something different to me, and therein lies would be confusion and understanding the charter anyway, right? So I think it would be important, at least for me and for everyone actually on the committee, to really read it, digest it, and then come to the next meeting with any clarifying questions that we have, that we have to help us move forward. Because I would hate to have people start bringing up amendments when we really don't have a good handle on what we've got right now. And maybe everybody does, but I certainly don't.
Well,
So.
and I think if we had the example charter from the league for the next meeting, the model, and we're able to go through, I think going through might be a little bit much to do the whole thing in one night, but kind of chunk it out rather than bringing our ideas first, to examine what we have currently first and then develop our ideas out of that conversation.
Is this charter that we have now not already based on a model?
Correct, it is.
It is.
Yeah, you'll notice that a lot of the charters have the same exact verbiage because
We're not
in
really here to
2006
reinvent it.
and 7, well, that's complete. Sorry. The charter that you have is based on the League of Oregon Cities Home Rule Charter, which I think came out in 2005, and a lot of municipalities adopted that Home Rule Charter model in 2005 and 6. Because I've seen the same, merit systems. Almost every one of them has that category for merit systems. But it's completely up to you. It's up to you what your timeline is. It's up to you when you refer to the ballot, you refer items to the voters. It's completely in your hands. If you were thinking more big picture, you can take a look at not only the charters that Sylvia and Joe put together in this packet, but you can look at other states, other municipalities in Oregon or Washington, and decide, do we think that this is a practical charter? Do we think it's, quote, good enough, or could it be improved in some way? It's completely in your hands. That's why this is a citizen-driven process and not necessarily driven by, political desires. I certainly, I have aspects of the charter I think that could be improved. But it's completely up to you what you decide to refer to the council, and based on that timeline is when we try to get it on the ballot. But I think what Jennifer said about, reading the charter, understanding what all the provisions mean, having some history, maybe understanding where those amendments or revisions came from, and then coming back and saying, we have 11 chapters of the charter. Do we think those 11 chapters capture what we think our city needs in its own constitution? And then figure out a way to break up, those chapters into something that's manageable, that doesn't make you feel like you're rushing through things. And once you decide how you're going to break it up, then you can also tap your resources, staff, legal, if you need clarification or additional information every time you get to that section, then they have time to do the groundwork to get you the information you need so that you're ready to have a productive conversation. So, again, this is driven by you. It's not driven by me. It's not driven by the council necessarily. It's not driven by staff. And my comments previously is the previous, charter revisions didn't pass because this process didn't happen. We didn't even take public comment. So I don't disagree with Mr. Christensen's comments about, take the time that you need. Don't feel like you're rushed or making a decision that later you wish you would have said, I wish we'd have spent more time on that. So.
Again, and you'll hear this just because I sat where you sat, 4 or 5 years ago. We went through the same issues early in our committee experience in Multnomah County, and we identified, just like you got a list from the council, but there's probably other things. And actually, that group broke into subcommittees. So one of the issues that we were grappling with in Multnomah County was whether the sheriff should be elected or appointed. because Multnomah County has an elected sheriff like most counties. But if you've watched what's gone on in Multnomah County, going back to Sheriff Justo and some of the controversies and that's a natural question that comes up every time in Multnomah County, and we really delved into that. What were the pros and cons of an elected versus an appointed sheriff? And our committee or subcommittee met separately from the charter review. I'm not suggesting that, but that's, I think, one of the reasons we're asking you to do this is because council doesn't necessarily have the time to focus and delve into stuff. That's your job, to really explore these. What are the merits of term limits? And there should be debate here and deliberation. I would beg to if I asked you what you thought about term limits, that we wouldn't have 9 answers all saying the same thing. We would have different perspectives on the pros and cons of that. So it should be a very deliberative process, because you're going to come out with findings and conclusions and recommendations ultimately to the council. And if you just come up and say, well, we recommend you change the charter in this way, and you haven't done that work, they're going to ask, well, how did they reach this conclusion? What's it based on? What kind of research was done? I mean, I think Mr. Christensen is right in terms of the importance of this and the history here. The other thing that I liked personally in Multnomah County was they had a clause in their charter that every 7 years or every 5 years, a charter review committee is formed. So it's not necessarily just a political decision when you want something changed, and there's an automatic process that every 5 or 7 years, a citizen committee is looking at the charter and taking the time to make recommendations to the elected body. So the decision to put amendments on the charter or on the ballot is still the elected officials. That's something that you might want to consider doing. Because if this is the first time this process has taken place in many years, if ever, in this community, that's something to consider, I think. And when you look at other charters and the model charter, you're going to see language like, I really like that language. You know, why did West Lynn do that? What was the issue that drove them to put that in their charter? And that takes time.
And it does bring up a good point, too, and that is, I think it's important that we don't work in a vacuum, that when we're looking at this, we have to think in terms of, okay, how are we in Sherwood? What's the personality, the environment here in Sherwood? But also, I wouldn't be beyond contacting these cities just to find out how are they happy with their charter? What are the things that they like about it? What is their process? How is it working? I look at West Lynn's charter, and it's been amended almost every year since 1995, and now maybe that's because they're going forward and just doing a little bit at a time, but what's the history there? That's very interesting to me. So I think it would be beneficial for us if we come across something that we want more information on, that we not work in a vacuum, but that we reach out to these other cities and get some input.
And that's one of the things what we can do to help facilitate that. I mean, you're certainly welcome to contact on your own as a citizen, but it's quite often easier for city staff who have relationships with other government officials to say, to do that research for you. We're here to help you make good decisions. And if that requires additional research or things that you need, that's what we're going to be looking for at every meeting. What do you need from us as staff people?
Question still remains on the floor on whether or not the 19th would be an appropriate time for the next meeting. And I guess, again, ask whether or not 6:30 is an appropriate time. Sylvia, you wouldn't happen to know if this room is free in 2 weeks?
It is available on the 19th.
Okay. Sense of the committee? Any objections? Or then I guess, Sylvia, could you please schedule us?
So at this time, I'll go ahead and, I'm sure, as you know, I'm your administrative support as well. So I'll, along with Joe, and kind of the process that we've used is staff would draft that agenda. We have to post the agenda to post proper notice. The topics on the agenda is up to this committee to decide. So that agenda will have date, time, obviously location, the topics, the general formality, the roll call, the approval of minutes. Those will be standard items on the agenda. But past that, it's up to this committee what you want to have on that agenda. So I don't know if you're prepared to provide those items tonight. If you want to work with the chair, the vice chair, the two of you together, however you want to decide, that agenda needs to have something to it, some substance to it.
Understood. If we get that back to you next week, would that be adequate?
That is adequate, yes.
Okay. I'll work with Pat, and we'll see if we can't put something together for you in a week.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about the button. I don't know if anyone's here that wants to provide public comment. If you want to consider that tonight, or if you want to wait for 2 weeks, that's entirely up to you. But there are some citizens here, and I'll let you
Absolutely.
decide.
Again, anybody here have a problem? It looks like we're excellent on our time. So, is there anyone else who has some public comments that they'd like to make? Please do.
I also applied or put in a application to be on this committee.
Again, could you introduce yourself?
Anthony Bell. I lived in Sherwood now for 16 years. I also applied to be on this committee, and I feel that the process of being nominated or accepted to this committee is a bit skewed, because everyone here has already is on a committee, and that's good because you know the process, Hoy's law and all of that. That's good, but yet still, I think there's a step. You're a step above the normal or regular citizen, which I felt I was. So everyone here has a vested interest, Parks and Recreation, culture, the SOPAC, and everyone here has an interest which they're going to protect. And where a citizen like myself, lobbying for myself, hopefully I could come in with open-minded. So I'm saying that the process is a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for, to be kind and not abrasive, a little skewed. Thanks.
So we have 3 at-large members, as I understand. Is that correct? Okay.
And none of them serve on a board or a commission.
Where are they?
I'm one of them.
You're not,
I'm Jennifer Kuiper. Yes. I served in the past,
Yeah, you served in Parks and Recreation and the Y,
and now I sing with
Maze
Voices
here
for the
and-
Performing Arts.
yeah, okay. So my argument holds.
Well, you are certainly welcome to. Please do. Please do. We're always open for feedback. And if you think we're getting a little too skewed, you put us back on the straight and narrow.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Could I hand out 10 items that I'm interested in thinking about?
What would probably be best, Kurt, is to give them to Sylvia and have her distribute them to the committee.
I think the idea of having an email for public input from all of you is a good process too.
Right. Yep. Anything else? Move to adjourn. Any objections? We are adjourned.